Good morning all and welcome to this week's Jump Advisory webinar on vacancy management, and we're going to slightly touch on business development as well. It's interesting. I've been reading an awful lot about the war of talent and the lack of talent in the marketplace, when in reality the human race is a mixture of people who are below average, people who are average, and people who are above average. I think there are very few people who are actually truly above the above average mark. But what we have with every client at the moment is they are searching for that above average person, as we search for our own people to work for us, that above average person. And guess what? Within a blink of an eye, we accept that that is what the client wants. And we tell the client instantly, of course, we can find those above average candidates. So in reality, what we are actually is we're afraid of our clients. You know, we keep hearing the customer is king, the customer is always right, and they're the two comments that we hear in almost every day of life. But if remember, for those who serve, and I remember being a young man working in a bar, having that fake smile constantly as you serve that rude, obnoxious person who looks down at you, demands their drinks, demands the ultimate service, when most of the time you're actually serving somebody else who's been very polite and very nice. So the reality is we're probably a little bit afraid of our clients and afraid of telling them the actual truth. So now as we look at our client base, what do we see? The customer is king. The customer is always right. And we smile through gritted teeth because we don't push back when we should really push back. And now I think we've got a true opportunity to properly push back. I keep saying that, you know, we need to create a prospect to process partnership when in reality the clients treat us as suspects. But if we drill down and we work out that we've probably had pushed out of us through time immemorial how to deal with that situation, we need to go back to clients and offer a blended approach of educating the customer to the cold facts of what's out there. And then we need to look at where we're in what we class as an abusive relationship, and we need to get out of that relationship. So today we're going to be mainly looking at educating the client, but we need to think about the capacity that we have and the client has to learn. And is there a point where we should actually walk away? So today I'm joined by Heather and Dave. Paul Sharp is on client site somewhere in London, wandering around London. Paul Jacobs is somewhere wandering around the North Sea, apparently. He is, not the North Sea, it might be the Irish Sea, might be in it actually. He's on a boat. Yes, he's gone on a cruise where he can't get off the boat and it's just going around the UK. So we're hoping he's enjoying himself, bobbing around up and down the Irish Sea, and there we go. So let's move straight into this because there's quite a lot to sort of cover a thing. But I want to sort of touch on the first point before we sort of move into vacancy management. I want to talk a little bit about business development. So let's talk about canvassing, because at the moment there's a lot of people when we go out and see clients, they're saying we're canvassing for new clients, we're doing lots of business developments. You know, I want to know from your side, Dave, and from your side, Heather, what you've seen that's either good, great, average, or poor tactics for canvassing at the moment. What are we actually doing canvassing clients?
I think a lot of recruiters at the desk at the moment are being encouraged to canvass clients with the candidates they've got because we are so short of good candidates. I mean, that's a huge generalization. I accept there are many, many sectors, but for the most part, there aren't enough people for the clients that we've got. You know, there are just not enough candidates. So when you get a good candidate, the canvassing that seems to be happening at the moment is, look, I've got a really good candidate with this healthcare skill, with this digital skill, with this education skill, and they're using that candidate to alert the market, to alert their potential clients or prospects to the fact that they've got a good skill. And where I've seen over the last sort of 4 or 5 months, that seems to be working really well. The kind of old days of just pick up the phone and call 50 people, I'm not seeing much evidence of that at all. And given that our recruitment sector is full of lots of new people, because we've had to hire, we've had this conversation before, haven't we? Where people have left the sector and those that have joined are new to the sector. And I remember being trained that I had a territory I had an EC1, EC2 territory when I worked, and I had to phone everybody on that territory. Those days have long gone. I think they've long gone from my observation. So it's now more about being a little bit more intelligent, either with the candidate or phoning the client to give them some information. Phoning the client to talk to them about, actually, this is what's going on. Can we talk to you, irrespective of asking for a vacancy?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Dave. I think the days of phoning up and seeing if people have got vacancies is just, it's counterproductive, isn't it? What value can there possibly be in loading your organisation up with vacancies when you have limited opportunity to fill them? So unless you know you've got a candidate or multiple candidates for a particular vacancy, where's the value in just getting the job for getting the sake, for the sake of getting the job? I think we're way out of that market at the moment. And as you say, with some limited exceptions where the market hasn't changed quite as much as it has elsewhere. So I think having a different conversation with your client is key, whether that is because you're talking to them about a specific candidate that you've got that you know might be appropriate for them, or because you've got some good market data for them, some good information to help with that education piece that Howard talked about at the beginning.
So I think that's really interesting. So that's what we see and that's what we hear. However, what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing more of, as we could talk through that sort of marketplace, are clients still canvassing new clients. Clients still put, and I'm talking clients as a recruitment agency, agencies still coveting how many jobs they actually have on and driving those jobs on. Hence why I'm saying, is it a great tactic? Is it a good tactic? Is it an average or is it a poor tactic? Because if we're just going to drive more poorly qualified jobs into our flow, then we're just creating and compounding problems. If we're never pushing back and politely pushing back to our clients, then again, we're having issues. At the moment, we have an opportunity, I think, where it is the biggest candidate market that we have ever seen. It's the biggest opportunities for recruitment agencies to take market share, but it's also the biggest opportunity for recruitment agencies to change the way that we are perceived by our clients. But what I'm seeing is the amount of clients that are agencies that are taking on jobs that are, in inverted commas, unfillable. They are that, blue unicorn that you can't find, but we're afraid to tell the client that. That's the issue that I'm starting to have now when we start to talk about business development. Are we able to tell the client the truth? Because sometimes the customer isn't right, and sometimes the customer needs educating on what is actually happening, and therefore we would have a more data coming back to us and be able to make a more informed choice of the clients that we work with to enable us to get a better result from the clients that we work with. Because again, I think with working with too many clients that just do not respect with what we do and are demanding the impossible from there. So
I think
if we,
I was just going to say, I think an interesting angle on that is how we manage our recruiters at the desk. Because often a measurement, and this is still true, very true today, despite what all three of us have said, there is a luster in having a number of jobs on. And often our recruitment consultants are managed. If you've got 20 jobs, you're doing better than someone who's got 10 jobs. Whereas there may be someone sitting in the corner who's got 3 jobs and will fill all 3, but you'll fill, 3 of your 20. And I think it comes down to management and leadership of the team leader, the office manager, the branch manager, the regional director. Just look at some of the KPIs of which we're managing our staff with.
Yeah, Paul and I've just had that conversation. Dave, Paul and I just had that conversation with one of Jump's clients about revisiting their KPIs, because there is a real acknowledgement that the KPIs were designed for a very different market, and that they're driving behaviours and they're rewarding behaviours that just aren't appropriate to drive what we need to do to be productive and successful in the current market. I think that's bang on.
We changed, Heather, we changed with one of our Jump clients, we changed the word performance in KPI to promise.
Nice.
And said, right, what are the key promise indicators that you're going to make to your client? And it isn't about, we're going to send you 7 CVs within 24 hours. Partly because it's in a sector where there aren't 7 CVs in 24 days. You know, if you can get one of them, you've done well. But it was not about, okay, so what's the promise? Goes back to Hal's point earlier on about truth. You know, can we be really honest and truthful and say to our clients, you know what, there isn't anybody with those skills in this market by next Monday. We'd still like to talk to you about what we can do, but we can't talk to you about those skills because they don't exist. And this is how we know, and this is the data that backs up that conversation.
Well, that kept promise up. I use kept promise index and an awful lot with my clients, and I'm saying to them constantly that if you're promising a client this, what's the client promising you? So it's all right, the client saying, I want, and you promise to deliver. If you can't deliver and you know you can't deliver, you're lying to the client, and therefore the client has a false understanding of what the recruitment agency's capabilities are, hence why they don't see us as a prospect, they see us as a suspect, because we're constantly lying to them rather than telling them the truth. So I think that index is very interesting, because what we promise, we should be also getting back from the client. So if a client promises to review CVs within 24 hours and have interviews booked within 48, etc., that's what we should be measuring on. And that starts to create the relationship between you and your client. What you promise and what you deliver, is it the same? Are you getting it back? Are you over delivering, or are you under delivering? Because a lot of people are under delivering hugely at the moment, but we're still not going back to our client at the moment. So I think that leads to a slightly different question, Dave, that if you look at, if you look at the brutality of the moment and look at the market, how brutal it is for both agent, candidate and client, because it's still very brutal for a candidate as well. We've got an opportunity, I think, at this moment to maybe change the way we price our service and the way our service is seen. So should we be actually now trying to drive our prices up with our clients or not?
I think there is never going to be a better opportunity to have an intelligent conversation about total cost, of which our margin is part of that. If you've got the right skills, then the client would pay, I would hope, in many cases, the price that you charge, because they're not going to get it from somewhere else. If you talk with a confidence, if you back up that confidence with data, if you talk with a little bit of history about this is what we've done and this is why we did it, you can absolutely command a higher fee. Probably easier on permanent than contract at the moment, because contract seems to be, you sign an agreement with a certain percentage, whereas on permanent, you could genuinely say, there's 15 of these people in the UK, I can get you that needle in the haystack, and the fee that we're asking you to invest in is 20%. In some respects, I used to feel that you'd lost the battle a bit if it all came down to price, because there's so much more to what we do than price, as we know. And we were always guilty. And, I used to work for Spring, and we had a business that was high volume, low margin. And we were always regarded as the company that drove the margins down. And I think in a lot of cases we did. But also we had 4 or 5 other businesses that were much higher margin. I think if you get into a margin conversation in a market like today, where we're the brokers and we know where the talent is, it feels a little bit you've almost lost the battle. I think absolutely right now you should be revisiting anything you're talking about with clients where you may be on preferred suppliers list at 12%. Well, you know full well when the market's bad, the clients come back to you and say, we're trying to shave a few points off our margin if you want to stay on our preferred supplier list. Don't worry, you'll be one of 30 and we'll give you at least 11 vacancies. And by the way, we'd like you to reduce your margin. Well, now the flip side. And it's not just about price, it's about having an intelligent conversation of which price is wrapped up in that.
So it's quite interesting that we talk about this. I remember sort of in the mid-90s, one of my main clients was Nissan up in the Northeast, and we were supplying contractors to Nissan. And Nissan used to ring me up, their procurement office used to ring me up every year And the opening line from their lovely Geordie lady was, "We hate you." And I go, "Why do you hate us?" with a smile on my face. She says, "Because every other part of our business, we can go to a client and say, we can do this and it will save you this. Therefore, you can reduce your margins or your fees or your costing to us." And what they were talking about, they told me about they've just gone to a ball bearing manufacturer and said, for the ball bearings that were in our car, if we shave 0.0001% off the ball bearing, it has no difference in our cars. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever, but it will save you X amount of tons per year of products that you need to source and for us. Therefore, we can reduce your cost. Therefore, you can reduce our cost. And I pushed back on her when she said that we can't reduce costs, because I pushed back and said we can reduce your costs by reducing your overall cost of recruitment by improving your recruitment process. So we did it the other way. So we maintained our margin. We didn't increase them where they were trying to reduce it. We maintained our margin because we gave them different and quantifiable evidence. So I was talking with a client yesterday about this very subject. And he said, now I've got data that I can pull off my system. I can use that to go to the client and say, look, on average, this is what your recruitment process looks like. I said, yeah, that's good, but that's only their recruitment process. Take all your recruitment processes that you do with all your clients, measure it and get the norm, and then go back to them. And then you've got, this is what you look like, this is what the norm looks like, and this is what great should look like. You're miles away from even the norm, let alone great. If we get from the norm, from bad to the norm to great, how much more money can we save? So it is about pushing back. So what you're saying there, Dave, about having quantifiable evidence and using that data appropriately is absolutely right. But just to push our prices up, I think you're right, Dave, in the comment, you've lost the battle. We may win the battle, but long term, the client's going to come back and re-chip that down again once it becomes more of an equal footing. But if we show our knowledge, our true professionalism, and actually go and give them quantifiable evidence on how we can actually save them money and improve their process, then absolutely we can drive prices up and keep them up. And that's the question. Keeping them up is the key. It shouldn't just yo-yo up and down. So we have to show something different than just say supply and demand is enough. You know, the ball's in our court now. Tough luck. The prices are going up. We have to give them a little bit more scope for long term to make sure the prices stay up and remain up, because we've all known over the last 10, 15, 20 years, the prices have been eroded and eroded and eroded steadily almost every year. Now's an opportunity for us to right that and keep them up and keep our value up, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
If we looked at that, let's then flip then. If we're going to drive our prices up, should we start to talk about giving our clients a better service than we're giving now? And if so, because we're under so much pressure just to find candidates, that I think our service has gone a little bit out the window. If so, how would we change our service now to drive our prices up and keep our prices high?
Do you know, it's interesting, Howard, because having been a client, so a user of recruitment services for many years, and many times Rec to Recs, but not always Rec to Recs, the one thing I would say that I would have wanted from all of my business, all the businesses I've dealt with, was transparency and honesty. So truth, you know, if they couldn't find a candidate, tell me they can't find a candidate. But the overpromise and underdeliver was never going to endear those businesses to me. I'd be much more likely to want an ongoing relationship. I know this sounds weird, but an ongoing long-term relationship with a recruitment business that said, on this occasion, I can't find you that, or on this occasion, that doesn't exist. So I don't want your vacancy. So, you know, they're the ones that I would have wanted to work with on a long-term basis, because I would trust then everything else they told me. I'd trust their data. I'd trust their advice. I'd trust their recommendations if they were willing to give me difficult messages about other things.
So what you're saying then is you're relying back on our conversation months and months ago about data is the new currency and data is king, but being transparent with that data and being able to be honest with your client brings that data alive.
100%. Data is really, really important and really valuable to clients, I think. But more than that, it's that willingness to, don't tell me you can help me and you can find what I'm looking for if you can't. Yeah, don't. And then we have that desire as salespeople to want to say yes to everything. And I think we have to have the confidence to say no. And I think our clients will appreciate that and want to build long-term relationships with us.
So as we sort of move, and I'll let Dave come into that question, but before we move into the next questions about how we managed our requirement flow, the instant part, what you're saying then, the first part of managing that requirement flow is saying no.
Yeah, 100%.
Because, you know, we keep saying yes to everything, then we're going to get an awful problem. And again, what we're doing is just tarnishing our name because we're over promising and under.
And it kind of links back to what you said at the beginning, Howard, about are we KPIing people on the number of jobs we've got in? Why are we keep taking jobs in that we can't fill? Why are we not saying to clients, actually, no, I can't fill that one for whatever reason? So yeah.
Well, it's the old adage, we can have as many jobs as you want. If you haven't got the candidates to fill the jobs, then the jobs are superfluous.
Yeah.
And
I'm still amazed at how many clients don't really understand what we do. 35 years into recruitment, still today, if I were to get 3 clients, and when we talk about clients, we're talking about individuals within a client. It's never the client. It's always a person who's given us the requirement. And still today, so many don't know what we do. They genuinely think we put in a quick LinkedIn search, or we go on a database, up pops the name, we phone the name, and that's it. And I think some of it is about education as well. About, okay, so let me tell you, you're giving me this requirement for an RPA expert. This is now what I'm going to do, and this is what will happen. And you just have a conversation. And I think anybody that's intelligent enough, brave enough, and it's not really bravery, it's just, this is our business. Anybody who can do that will get better buy-in from the client because they just don't know. Often they've just been told, we need 3 of these for this project, go and get them. Who's on our supplier list?
But I think that's 2 ways though, isn't it, Dave? That's ignorance of the client, but that's ignorance of the recruiter not telling the client exactly what we're going to do every single time, irrespective of that, and what the market conditions are like constantly. And if you start to think about marginal gains look at absolutely every single part. So you start to think about, this is your process. But if you look at, say, Paul Jacobs at the moment, it's out on a boat at the moment, a marginal gain would be, it's a flat sea. Yeah. If it's a rough sea, what they're going to do to negate that and work with that, etc. Yeah. So they're always working with what the outside influence is, as well as the inside influence, to create proper marginal gains and things like that. And I think that's what we've got to understand, is that every day that we recruit for a client, it's a process might slightly change. It might slightly be different because there's different things that we have to do to attract different types of candidates, etc., and put them through the process. And the pressure is always different. You've got some areas where there's lots of candidates. Yes, they still might be hard to find, but there's lots more to go at. Others where there are very few candidates that have that certain skill set. So again, it's not so much supply and demand, it's what processes do you have to go through to get that client. So I think driving up our services is all about understanding what the client truly wants and then actually selling what our service is to that client, rather than how many agencies will be on here that says, well, I've got a preferred supplier, I've been dealing with this client for 10 years, but we sold our service 10 years ago. We've never upgraded our service, never changed our service, never told them what we're doing differently from that, and what costs have added to our business because we're having to do that to keep up with the marketplace so they can keep the right candidates employed and keep their staff levels at the right level. So I think to push our prices up, we have to give a better service. But to do that, I think our clients need to understand that service.
Yeah, and I think it's fine to put your prices up when you're dealing with a small commodity, but you have to remember that people your clients will remember if you took the mickey and took advantage of a difficult situation. So, you know, there is some moderation required in how we respond to the power balance opportunity that we have to think about pricing.
So it's interesting you use the word power balance there, Heather. So here's the next question that comes out then is, we all know that lazy recruiters will hide behind poorly qualified roles or work with clients who don't genuinely respect them. And I always say there are the convinced people and the unconvincible. And we have to understand who is who at the moment. And I think the problem is that we've got a lot of recruiters out there who are the inconvincible side. That client's bound to change. They're going to change. They're going to change. They're going to change. Well, they haven't changed the last 20 times they've given you a job. Why are they going to change now? So how do we convince the inconvincibles to change for the better of recruitment?
Yeah.
Data.
Yeah. It's interesting. Lazy recruiters. This may be a bit controversial, but I'm not sure there are too many lazy recruiters. There are lazy managers who are allowing their recruiters to be lazy. Because if people are managed right, and if you help define, you use your leadership to help define what they do, they won't be lazy recruiters. That they're only being lazy recruiters because they're being allowed to get away with it, because they're not being led properly. Because most people want to be led. Most people want to know what to do. And if you've got a community, and we've always said this, if you've got 10 recruiters, 2 may be poor, 7 may be great or okay, and 3 will be exceptional. You know, in some of the businesses on this call, there may be people who wish that was their ratio. Yeah, but it comes down to how people are led and how people are measured. And people shouldn't be allowed to get away with being a lazy recruiter. So that, for me, that's to look inside and look at the management and the team leaders who are responsible for that particular person, and encouraging them to lead those people differently.
So that goes back to that old adage, isn't it, that our KPIs or our compensation drives behaviors. So if our rewards are based on the KPIs that are all about jobs, then we will take on poorly qualified jobs just to hit that KPI. And that's the problem, isn't it, where we need to think about what KPIs that. Now, I've worked with a number of clients over the recent months where I'm saying you need to grade all your jobs, grade them from 10 being really high end, 1 being absolutely poor, only work jobs that are grade 8 and above. And they keep going, well, all my best clients are all grade 4 and 5. I said, well, yeah, that's your problem. Your best clients are all grade 4 and 5, and you're working so many jobs that you never fill. Why are you working that job? Go back and educate the client. So how do you educate them from that job being a 4 and 5 to being a 7 and 8, a 9 and 10? And it's when you start to break those down, and everyone will have a different view of what their number 10 level is and what their number 1 level is, breaking it down. And that's when you've got to convince those unconvincibles that you're working with a client that is basically, you know, you're basically in an abusive relationship. They're abusing you completely, and you're not fighting back.
That's so interesting when you put it like that. You know, there are some recruiters who've swallowed the Kool-Aid, right? And they just don't have the belief in their own service anymore. If you're willing right now to accept working on a grade 4 and a grade 5 job, you've forgotten or you've lost sight of what an amazing thing you do as a recruiter. And maybe, as Dave says, the leaders and the managers in that organisation need to re-inject that sense of pride and belief in what they do, so they have the confidence to only work the 8, 9 and 10 jobs, to know that it's okay to be demanding of your clients and say, well, I'm only going to do it if you give me feedback at this level, you give me exclusivity, you give me, you know, all of the things that feed into what makes an 8, 9 and 10. But you've got to give the unconvincibles, you've got to give them the confidence to know that that's what you want them to do, and that they're not going to lose out, and they're going to earn more commission that way, because they're going to feel their fill rates are going to go up substantially, and there's enough jobs around to do that right now.
And there's the comment from you, Heather, that from a HR perspective rather than from a sales perspective, that you understand the fact that if you're working better qualified jobs, your fill rate will instantly increase because you're not spending your time on the inconvincible client to try change their process, because my process is perfect. Why would I change it? Well, I've sent you 20 CVs and I still haven't had an interview, and I've now got to send you another 20 CVs. I still haven't got an interview, but I'm still happy because you're a prestigious client to me. Well, you're not. Get used to it and get rid of the client instantly on that sort of thing. So let's sort of flip the question then and sort of say, if that was the case, and that's what we're looking at the moment, and there's a lot of agencies in that situation, what's the first thing you'd change?
Oh, good question, Howard. The first thing you change, I would want all recruiters to be triaging jobs properly. That's the one thing I would tell you to do. Stop wasting your time on jobs that you can't fill. And that can't fill for lots of reasons, not just because there aren't very many candidates, but because your clients won't work to a sensible process.
Yeah. And I'd want them to make a note of that requirement that comes in, using the immense amount of market data that is available, all the stuff that's on LinkedIn, all the intelligence we have now. If you are working a niche market, you know where the candidates are and you know where they're not, and you know how much they want in a permanent role, how much they'll take on a contract role. I'd want to make sure that actually the requirement I was working on, I had a greater than, and it's different for different sectors, I guess, but greater than 80% chance of filling it.
Yeah.
And that number is clearly, that's an arbitrary number because it may be 70, it may be 80, it may be 90. But if you can't get to that number, just don't waste your time.
Yeah.
So I think that's about having the brutal truth to yourself, that what you've got to start to think is that your employees are, led by you. And what you said there, Dave, it's the management, probably lazy management at the top, not driving that down. So to me, the first thing I'd start to look to change is how we view the client or how we view the vacancy. And what you're saying there, Heather, is the fillability of that vacancy is absolutely paramount. Why work on something that you've never got a cat in hell's chance of filling? So I think what we're saying is that the first thing we'd change is the mindset of what we're actually looking for and how we're measuring that, to make sure we're measuring the right things. If we're measuring jobs, then it's just, I'm bigger than you, I've got more jobs than you. Woohoo! Yeah. If we're measuring candidates that we've got through the process and we're placing, then that's a far better opportunity for us. What's going to give us, the end result that we want, which is a placement. So we're going to work with clients that can smooth that process for us and allow us and treat us in the way that would actually enable them to get to the end of the process as well, rather than just demand, I want a candidate in a chair in that way. We talk about that, and I'm sure, Dave, you and I have been out with lots of clients just recently and had that same conversation. I'm sure, Heather, you've had that conversation from an HR point of view when you're, talking about disciplining poor consultants, but they never come back and say, but I've been working poor jobs, when actually that's the reality, that we've allowed them to work those poor jobs rather than change them and stop them working them and find better jobs. So how do you embed that change? Because that's a great answer to a very simple question, but how do we embed that change to make sure it stays and people actually see the benefit of only working quality roles?
And for me, Howard, it comes to the top, from the top, because most of Jump's clients, most of them, the principals are still on the tools. Not all of them, but most of them. Most of them, at some point, the MD or the founder is still doing the business, because when recruitment is in your blood, it doesn't just leave you because you become a leader or a manager. You still think and you still can do the job. And most companies, if you've got less than 30 staff, it's very rare that a company can afford to have an MD or a group MD or whatever who isn't actually doing the job. So therefore, this sounds very simplistic, but if you're the leader of your business, lead from the front. This is how I do it, and I'd like you to replicate this. And most leaders if they're good leaders, people will follow them. And if they're leaders that educate their staff and give them time, they're going to follow them. And that change can happen really, really quickly.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It comes from the leadership of the organisation. Are you focusing on the right things? So are you explaining the change in market and the change in priority to your teams? Are you changing the way you manage your SMT? Are the SMT then changing the way they manage the managers within the business? So all of that comes from the leaders of the organisation. Are they setting the right tone? As you say, Dave, are they leading from the front? Are they instilling confidence in the people around them to say, we're worth it?
Yeah,
we're worth it.
I'm just looking at the slide Howard's put up. I'm thinking, that man looks like me.
Dave, I wish that man was you, because we'd be in a whole different situation.
Hold on. It's Jeff Bezos.
When I was still at school, I worked at Woolworths.
I know. But I'm sitting here thinking to the people watching this, where did I go wrong? Why would anyone listen to me? Because I'm not Jeff Bezos.
So to me, we're attacking the management here, but I'm going to sort of flip it a little bit, and it'll lead back to management. I always think, we've talked about, I always class about the terror of management, and being dyslexic, I spell terror T-E-R-A. T being tribe, E being evidence of where we're going, R is rank, but the A is, I think, is what's really important. The A is about autonomy. Do your staff have the autonomy to actually discuss things, say things, bring ideas out without the fear of retribution? And I think if you go and speak to most recruiters, they understand that they're working poor jobs, they're working low qualified jobs because they're trying to drive to hit certain things. They'll tell you which jobs they can fill, which jobs they can't fill, but they're scared of not working certain types of roles. And I think if we allow the autonomy of our consultants to actually speak up a little bit, maybe we get a quicker, faster understanding of what the market conditions are truly like.
Yeah.
And therefore, can we adjust to the marketplace? So I think our management has to really understand what our consultants are seeing, as well as what the data's telling us, to actually then get a more informed decision. So then their due diligence becomes a far bigger process, so they can actually make the right call and change earlier in the process. And I think, to me, that's all about embedding that change. If you're listening to what your consultants are saying and you're helping them smooth a process to actually deliver more results for them, guess what? Your consultants will buy into that more and more. If you're just changing the process from the top and not involving them, then guess what? They push back against that process because they don't feel you're part of the tribe. They feel that you're not part of the tribe. So I think the first thing I would change would be that, listen to what the consultants are saying about the marketplace, because if they're saying we're never going to find that candidate, then why are we working on that job? Why are we actually entertaining that job? Why are we even spending money advertising that job out when we know we're never going to get from there? What a waste of cash type scenario. So if we're looking at that, we talked a lot of this about measurements. How are we going to measure the success when it comes to vacancy management if we're not seeing one of the successful things as being the number of vacancies I have on?
Okay, so what are we going to measure instead? Well, I think it would be interesting to measure, if you're going to triage, to measure how many grade 8, 9 and 10 jobs you're working. I think it'd be really good to measure the responsiveness of your clients rather. So how many jobs are you working where your clients give you feedback quickly, where they don't have a 4-stage interview process or more? Where you've got trusted relationships, where you've got exclusivity on jobs. Though I would change them to measures of things that we know drive fill rates.
So it's interesting that you measure those things, Heather, but all those things are based on the client and your relationship with the client. What's the one thing then that we need to be measuring that we've not measured that would give us a better insight whether we could fill that job or not?
Yeah, obviously candidates.
Yeah. So to me, the first thing we should be measuring is a job comes in, how many candidates have we got registered on our database that can potentially do that job? or how many candidates are actually out there in the marketplace that can do that job. If you're looking for 0 candidates on your database, then it's pretty obvious that there's not very many candidates that can do that job. If you've got hundreds of candidates on your database that can do that job, the chances are you'll find the right candidates, because you know there's your database and the market outside of that. So to me, the first measure I'd have on any vacancy is I'd look straight at my CRM. How many candidates have I got that could potentially fill that job?
And the reality is, though, Howard, for most people, they don't go to their database first. They go to
Sadly, you're right,
Dave. Job boards.
Sadly.
I mean, they do use your database. I'm not being flippant on that. But many consultants at the desk will look and go, right, I know so and so can do this job, or here's my hot list, which is good. But they don't always use the databases effectively because they would think it's not as up to date. It's a separate topic for another day, but it isn't always on the database.
And I think you're absolutely right, Dave, that it's, people don't use a database because we are, inverted commas, lazy recruiters, and we're looking for the quickest way to get to the candidate. So if I advertise to the candidate, I put it on LinkedIn, wherever I put it, but then we think that's the quickest way to the marketplace. And yet we've got a database there with candidates that we can instantly call, text, and talk to that could potentially fill those jobs. And so to me, that is a very shoddy process from a recruitment point of view, that if you set your processes out, this is what we measure first, whether it's an 8, 9, 10, whether it's a 2, 3, 4 type of job, because you could have a job that it's the best client in the world, they've got the best recruitment process in the world, but they're still looking for a blue unicorn, then that job's a 1. Out and out 1, you're never going to fill the job because you haven't got any candidates. So to me, that measurement of the candidate capability is really important. If you're then working in a niche, then I'm measuring my consultants constantly on the number of candidates that they bring into that marketplace that are on my CRM that I can potentially use, market to, and potentially then create a fee from rather than not. So if we're saying then vacancy management is about changing the way that we look at that, what's more important, candidate management or vacancy management?
Management.
It's a chicken and egg, isn't it?
It's just what manage. It's management and leadership of the people at the desk, because you can't have one without the other. You've got to get the balance right, and this is not an overnight thing. It just comes with time. If you're finding that you're measuring the wrong things at the moment, try to change it to measure the right things. Of the things that work, carry on, and the things that don't, stop. I mean, that sounds so obvious, it's almost embarrassing to say it, but that's what I do.
Heather?
I think it's a chicken and an egg. I think if you don't, you got to have candidates. That's what we're here for, right? And candidates are difficult to find. But if you're wasting your candidates on clients who aren't going to come back to you, aren't going to give you feedback, aren't going to, you're just, well, I'm going to say something really rude, then I'll use a different analogy, but you're wasting your time. You're wasting your time. And so I think it's a chicken and egg. They're both important. I don't think it's possible to choose.
It was quite interesting when I was sort of pulling today's session together. This came into my head. Deep down, we believe the problem is simple. It's them. And they, of course, believe that we are the problem. And if you look at that from a management to a consultant point of view, from a consultant to a management point of view, if you look at that from a company to an agency to a client point of view, an agency to a candidate point of view, we always seem to deflect the blame to somebody else. It's them. Where we've got to start to think that it's us. We're the problem. We own the problem. So to me, what's most important is the quickest route from A to B is what we need to be measuring and what we need to be looking at. So to me, that candidate management is absolutely important. The vacancy management, though, is the quality of what you're going to be working on. So if you don't manage your candidates, then vacancy management doesn't matter in the first place because you haven't got candidates to fill it. Exactly. If you're managing candidates really well, your vacancy management then is critical. Putting your candidates to the clients who are going to give you the most optimum opportunity to place, not the candidate clients that demand stuff, but then never come back to you. And then when they do, it's 3-4 weeks down the line and your candidate's already gone and you've got to redo the job again, etc. To me, it's about working with the right client candidates and the right clients. So both sides to me then become really important of what you're doing and how you measure that.
Yeah, agree with you.
Brilliant. Ladies and gents, that is it for today. We've got lots coming up over the next 3 weeks on this type of topic, moving it forward and driving it down the chain to make sure that everybody's doing the right thing for the business. Everyone's looking at the right things in order to make the right decisions, because I think what we're saying there, that a lot of these decisions are management decisions and we've got to understand what they are. So next week we're going to look very precisely at increasing perm fees, temp fees, contract fees, because we think this is a conversation that is a real hot topic at the moment. Lots of agencies are shying away from this. Lots of agencies are still going, let's drop my pants and I'm happy to do it at 5% because I just want the jobs. I think there's an opportunity now, if we understand how we can actually, charge appropriately for our services, can we change the way clients see us forever? So, ladies and gents, thanks very much for today. It's been much appreciated. Dave and Heather, thank you much for your input, and we'll see you all next week.
See you next week.
Have a good week, everyone. Thank you.